Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Welcome to Sports Spectrum, everybody. I'm Jason Romano. It's great to have you joining us here today on the show. Really excited about our guest today, Demario Davis. He's been on the podcast a few times. We brought him back, and we wanted to talk to him because he's got a lot going on with the New Orleans Saints having a great 2019 season, off to a 7-1 start. They got Drew Brees back, and Demario Davis has become the emotional leader for this New Orleans Saints team. Just go on their social media, and you're bound to see a pregame hype speech, pep talk, whatever you want to call it, from Demario Davis, and he's got a lot going on with his Man of God headbands as well. But before we get to our conversation with Demario, I want to tell you about Sports Spectrum and the Sports Spectrum magazine. $18 for an entire year gets you a full subscription to the Sports Spectrum magazine. A full year for just $18. It's a great deal. It's a quarterly magazine. Demario has been featured in many a Sports Spectrum magazine with devotionals and with stories being done on him and other athletes around the world of sports, intersecting with the world of faith in Jesus Christ. The Sports Spectrum magazine, it's as quality of a magazine as I've seen. It's really well done. John Ackerman, our editor, and Aaron Sauer, our designer, do a fantastic job. If you saw this magazine, you'd think it took a team of 50 or 60 to put it together, and it's actually a very small team of 3 or 4 people that put the Sports Spectrum magazine together. It's part of our ministry, and it's a great way for you to support our ministry, and you still get a really great magazine in return. 4 issues, a quarterly magazine, $18. You can subscribe today by going to sportspectrum.com. It's good to welcome back Demario Davis, New Orleans Saints linebacker, Man of God headband creator, to the podcast. Demario, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me on, man. Always a pleasure.
It is great to have you back. This is the second or third time you've been on the podcast. And I mean, listen, you got a lot going on. You have a new book out, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. You're in the midst, like I said, of another NFL season. You're in your 8th year in the league, which is kind of crazy. But I want to talk about this Man of God headband thing that's kind of taken on a life of its own over the last few weeks and even the last month or so. It's made national news. It's turned into a pretty awesome thing. So I'd like for you to kind of take us through where the Man of God headband kind of stemmed from, and then we'll kind of talk about it. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think so much of that is just, all that credit goes to God, man, and who he is. The past few seasons, he's kind of given me a heads up or a glimpse of what the season was going to be like by giving me a theme entering each season. 2 years ago, it was the breakthrough season. And last season was the harvest season. And this season is the overflow season. And so I've kind of had maybe a theme or an idea of what that season. And here we are. And after week 3, this thing with the headband kind of takes off and grabs, national attention. And I made a comment about, when I was fighting for the headband, that God was going to get the glory from it whether I wore the headband or not. And he did, certainly. I mean, it took on, national attention, and you have kids wearing the headbands in an entire school. Everybody around the country buying the headbands and wearing them. You got over $250,000 that have been raised for St. Dominic's Hospital, which is rebuilding this emergency room. I mean, it just really took on a life of its own. That I can only give the credit to God, So here I am wearing a headband that says "Man of God," and I'm fined $7,000, and in return, it's raised over $250,000 and counting. That's a project that'll go on for the rest of the year, and I hope that even more people will get behind it. The cost of a emergency room is pretty pricey, so I think the hospital is going to appreciate every dollar that's raised towards that. But it's just been phenomenal. And on top of that, having the book come out and, all the other things that are going on, great things happening with the Players Coalition. So just a lot of good things going on off the field. And what I've always wanted to do is use my platform in the league to bring glory to God, and I think He's doing that in a lot of different ways through my life. So I can only give credit and glory to Him.
Demario, when you first wore that headband, was that just something you had made for you, obviously to honor God, or was that something that you envisioned maybe becoming something that you could have other people purchase and buy and become a part of?
No, that was just something. I mean, the company Sleeves send me headbands and wristbands, headbands and sleeves every year. They have different designs on them. And I think them knowing my faith, they sent me one that had Man of God on it. And it was just one that I took interest in, and I just wore it. It was just for me. It was under the helmet. I knew I couldn't wear the one on the sleeve because it would be out. They had a message on it.
Yep.
But I wasn't sure about, if it was covered up. So, that was just a headband that I was wearing, not trying to draw any attention to it or any attention to myself. And so when I got the fine, I was actually surprised because I had been wearing it all season and never, had heard anything about it. And then after that week, I was fined. And so, of course, they put me in like a compromising situation. And that's really where my question stemmed from. Should I wear it or should I not? Not in a way of being disobedient, but, should I boast even more in my faith or kind of just kind of tuck it away and let it go? And so I definitely wanted for it to be a situation to where I didn't have to feel like I was ashamed about wearing the headband or somebody feeling like, as soon as I was attacked for wearing the headband that I moved away from it. But I wanted to, pretty much try to amplify or glorify God in a grander way. And I never would have imagined it would have did as much as it did.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I saw a lot of brushback, especially from religious organizations or faith-based organizations that were kind of lashing out at the NFL, saying they were anti-God. And I don't think that was the case. I think the NFL has their rules, right, about messaging of any kind, whether it's religion or anything else, that they were trying to police it. But I thought it said a lot to me, just from the outside, that not only did the NFL rescind the fine, but then this thing blew up and took off and took on a life of its own. And now people are wearing Man of God headphones, men, women, kids, babies. Everybody is getting these Man of God headbands. And it really showed me the power that God still has a place in this society, because we live in an anti-Christian world in many ways, or at least a country that's heading towards that way. But there's still a pretty cool thing that God can do in this country to people who are understanding and saying, okay, yeah, maybe I'm not supposed to be sharing my faith or being open about my faith, but man of God, that's what I am. Woman of God, that's what I am, right?
I mean, it just shows you, like you said, the power of God. Here we are, and the NFL is just doing its job. They weren't doing nothing more than doing their job of.
Correct.
It was a uniform violation. It wasn't, anti-religion or anything like that. It was a uniform violation. Here they are sending out a fine, and then it, kind of takes on a life of its own. And, once the NFL, I'm guessing, realized that I wasn't going to wear it anymore, that I wasn't fully clear of the rule, and of course, probably with as much attention as it got, they took away the fine. And so all those proceeds, all I did was I had already planned for that money to be gone. So I just sent that to the hospital as well.
Yeah.
And here we are. Then all of a sudden, everybody wants to wear the headband, and they start selling like hotcakes. I think the first night we put them out, I want to say about $30,000 was raised.
Wow.
Like the first night or first two nights that it was out, and it was just amazing. It was amazing to see, and there's still major orders coming in, and more people are wearing them. But what strikes me even more is the messages that I get via Twitter or Instagram, where people are thanking me for, taking a stand for my faith, or letting me know how encouraged they are in my boldness and braveness to stand on what I believe, and how it's somehow subconsciously making them more bold in their faith. And so I don't think that we have completely moved to anti-God country or a lack of Christianity in our country. What I believe is the people who are not believers are just louder than the ones who are believers. And what it is doing is letting the believers know, it's men of God and women of God and children of God, letting them know that it's time for them to be more bold in their faith and letting other people know who they are and what they stand for and not being ashamed of that. And I didn't even know that was going on in the country. I didn't know that people were feeling like that they couldn't be bold in their faith and they couldn't, let people know that they were children of God, men of God, women of God. And I think this somehow encouraged them to let their light shine before others. And so I think it means a lot for a man and a woman to go to the gym with their headband on, saying exactly who and what they represent. And so if it encourages anybody just a little bit, then that's all I've ever wanted my life to be is a light, in a dark place.
But isn't it interesting, too, that I'm sure there are people, especially on your team, but just in the world, obviously, that don't have that same faith, and yet they respect the heck out of what you stand for, who you are as a person, and even what you're doing with the Man of God headbands, because it's going to help others and serve others, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's what we should all want to do and aspire to do as human beings is to help our fellow man. And so anyway, what I've seen in going to Flint and what I've seen in going to the border, any type of humanity that we can do in serving our other human beings and having compassion on them, it somehow encourages other people to say, hey, what can I do to help? And if there's a way that people can join in and help people, I think they're going to be have a desire to do that because it's just kind of who we are on the inside as human beings. They're going to have a desire to do that no matter what they believe.
How can someone get one of the headbands? Do you have a website or a place that you're directing them to buy them?
Yeah, on Sleeves. If you type in Sleeves /manofgod.com, they can go on there. And on my Instagram page, there's a link in the bio that can take you directly to the link to be able to get a headband, wristband, whatever for the Man of God. And it's Man of God headbands, Woman of God headbands, Child of God headbands, black and gold, which is team colors, and pink.
That's awesome. We'll check out the Instagram page and we'll link to that in the show notes and certainly on the website at sportspectrum.com. Okay, another thing that's happened, and you mentioned it, we didn't talk about it too much yet, is that you are a published author, which might sound weird for me to say that, but it's true. You have a new book out. It's called The Unsuccessful Champion, which is a unique title. Tell us about the title, about the book, and why you decided to write a book.
Yeah, it is funny to hear. I never in my life would have imagined, being an author. Never had a plan to write a book. But after doing articles for the Increase and Becky, writing so much of my story through different things that I've shared, she was like, encouraged, you should write a book. And I did know that I do have a unique story, and I do believe that my life, my testimony can help a lot of people, and it has helped a lot of people, whether it was through one-on-one conversations or group sessions or lectures that I've given where I've shared pieces of my testimony, and it's helped countless individuals. And so to put it in a book and be able to help even more people, it was definitely something that, I was more than willing to do. My life is to the glory of the Lord. And so any way that he wants to use it, I'm going to be willing. I'm willing if I'm able. And so we went to work on the book, telling my life story and kind of finding ways to encourage people through the stories and not just kind of tell the story, but we wanted to show my life and how the gospel has impacted my life and how the gospel continues to impact my life and how my life can help others draw close to that same relationship with God and be impacted by the gospel in the same way. And so that's really what the book is about. the title Unsuccessful Champion is what I would kind of theme my life compared to what others may success others may what others may deem as success. I wouldn't always say that I've had those things, and so every time I felt like I should have received one thing, I didn't quite get whatever it was, and so going all the way back to me being a kid, growing up and playing against my cousins, they were always better than me, so I was always the loser. I wasn't a success in that regard, and so even my first year of football, even though I scored like 40-something touchdowns and our team went undefeated, we lost in the championship game. So I wasn't successful in that regard. Being on the playing basketball, not making the team the first 2 years trying out. So I wasn't successful in that regard. Being a high school player and then end up being like a two-star football player, though I thought in my mind I was a 5-star. So I wasn't successful in that regard. Then going to Arkansas State instead of going to, like old SEC school. So I wasn't successful in that regard. Then, thinking I should be a first-round, second-round draft pick, but going in the third round. So I wasn't successful in that regard. Then, being on the Jets and the Browns and, never making the playoffs until I came to the Saints, which was my 7th season, so I wasn't successful in that regard. And, going in my 8th season and never making a Pro Bowl. So it's like I haven't been successful in that regard. And so it's like what other people would deem as not successful because I didn't hit the goal that maybe I had in my mind. I could look at that as being unsuccessful. But, in all those areas, whether I won a championship or I got the accolade or got any of these things, I'm a champion because of what I count as a victory and what I count as a loss. I'm a champion because I found Christ. And so the victory is already won. Whatever that end game is, the championship is the last game of the season. So the end game, when it's all said and done, and I'm sitting at the throne room before God, the last thing that happens is I'm going to be judged, and I'm going to win because of what Christ did. And so I already have victory. And so I carry myself as a champion not because I've been successful in the world's eyes. Though other people will look at my life and say, well, that doesn't make any sense. You're very successful. In comparison. But what could very easily be seen as unsuccess, I'm already a victor. I'm already a champion. Because of where I place my perspective. And that perspective is on Christ and Christ alone. And so because of what Christ has done for me, I'm a champion, and eternally I'm a champion. And nobody can take those rings away. So even if somebody I could have won a championship in Pee-wee, high school, college. Yeah. I could have 6 Super Bowl rings. I could be, all pro all these different times. And be very successful in the world's eyes. And I could be a successful loser if I didn't have Christ. Yeah. And so I would rather be an unsuccessful champion than a successful loser. And that's what the title of that book is about. And that's kind of what the book kind of entails. It entails all the situations I've been in that you could see as unsuccess, or the lack of success. And it also entails how I became a champion and what a champion life looks like.
Again, the new book is called The Unsuccessful Champion, Finding True Victory in the Midst of Adversity, forward by Benjamin Watson, your former teammate, and released October 4th. And it's out now on Amazon and all the other places. And I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot more about that book. And there's some great stories in there, too. I love the story. And with time purposes, Demario, I'm not going to ask you about it, but the story of you choosing where to go in free agency in 2016 is pretty incredible. And I highly recommend people get the book and read just that story alone. It will blow your mind in terms of Demario fasting for 3 days in free agency. It's a crazy story. He's told it to us here before at Sports Spectrum. All right, for time purposes, I just got a couple more questions for you. I got to ask you about the pregame pep talks, because these things are blowing up on social media as well. And I watch you and I think about, man, to get that hype, how do you get that hype to give a pregame pep talk like that? And then how do you come back down to earth to try and channel that into a football game and play? Talk about those pregame planned pep talks. Are they planned? Do you put those out and kind of think about what you're going to say, or do you just go in and go all out?
It's kind of a build-up. So so much of it is I'm just kind of waiting on God to say, what is it that you want me to say to the team?
Mm-hmm.
And he'll kind of give me a theme or something during the week, and I'll just kind of meditate on, like, that theme or whatever it is, and kind of like some bullet points that I maybe need to hit on. But I don't kind of go into game mode until maybe a couple hours before the game. And so once I kind of go into game mode, I'm kind of transitioning. I always call it like the lion and the lamb. I'm more the lamb in person, and on the field I'm the lion. And so I start kind of transitioning it's a transformation from that lamb to the lion. And so it's this whole jungle mentality. And as my mind and my spirit starts to shift, it kind of heightens that theme. And I just kind of let it play in my head and play in my heart and play in my soul, and just kind of like, just kind of let it cycle around as I'm, getting ready for the game, thinking about what all I have to do to be successful and in my job, but also be a force for my team. And I just kind of let all that energy and passion build up. And, right before I run out, I just kind of drop down on a knee and, go before the throne and, let the Holy Spirit do what it wants to do. And, when I step on the field, it's so electric stepping inside that huddle with your team. It just kind of brings out all that passion and all that energy. And so that exact same passion and drive that you see in that speech is kind of what I use during the game as well. And so, it's a lot of energy and a lot of passion, but at the same time, it's very locked in and very focused and detailed.
No, that's good. You can tell there's a message behind it, even though you're so pumped up and you're so hyped. It is awesome to watch. I highly recommend people just go to Demario's Instagram or Twitter page and watch a few of those. Or even the Saints are putting those out each week too. So check them out. Let me ask you about, real quick, God working inside the Saints locker room this year. You mentioned how unique this team is, especially coming back from last year where you had a lot of success and basically a play or two away from going to the Super Bowl. And this year, it's hard to repeat and rebound from things like that. You guys have really done a good job on the field. You're 7-1, but what's God doing behind the scenes that we can't see as far as Bible studies and just team bonding and things like that?
Yeah, man. I mean, the Bible studies have gone great. Our team and the wives are going through 1 John, and that's just really been good, just teaching us the attributes of God and the attributes of the faith that we believe in, and making us more sound in understanding our faith, but also being ready and willing to give a defense to it. I think it's just created a lot of gave us a lot of helpful information in that regard. We've had a couple of couple studies. They have gone really well, just encouraging marriages. And we have a good group in that regard. But I think probably the best thing in our locker room that is very rare is just, our bond as a team. It's really like a family. And there's a general amount of respect and understanding of each player in the locker room across the board. And that creates the bond, I think, that people see. And when people are watching us and it's energetic and it's exciting, it's because we are really having a blast to be out there on the field with one another. But I mean, it just comes from, the laugh and the fun that we have in the locker room, that we have on the trips, that, we spend outside the locker room with each other at different events and different hangouts, and so it's just, it's really a bond and a brotherhood and a family that, couldn't be found anywhere else. And I'm just grateful to God that he gave me the opportunity to be a part of something like this, because any team that I ever play on, this is the type of bond and chemistry that I would want the team to have.
Yeah, and it's doing really well. You called it the overflow season in 2019 here. The Saints are 7-1, halfway through the year, just about. You're on your bye week, getting ready for your next game in a couple days. And listen, really been great to talk to you, Demario. What's God teaching you right now? We got to ask it because we always ask it to every guest here. What are you learning from God right now?
Oh, man, so much God is teaching me. I think the biggest thing that God is showing me, that there's so much fruit that comes from obedience, just being obedience. And what God means in obedience is greater than sacrifice. Sometimes we can feel like we're doing something for God because we're sacrificing our time, or we're sacrificing some of our resources to do something for God that we may or may not have wanted to do. And we can say, oh, well, this is how I'm lifting or I'm glorifying God by making this sacrifice with my time and my resources. But God desires obedience. So it's like, you can sacrifice all you want to sacrifice, all the time, all the resources, and lift it up to God and say you're doing this great thing for God. But at the end of the day, is that what God told you to do?
That's really good.
What did God tell you to do? What did he request of you? Because that's the most important thing. God desires obedience. And that's what we show a heart of humility, is where we're before his throne and saying, God, what do you want me to do? And then when he tells you exactly what he wants you to do, and it may not make any sense in the world. It may not make any sense in the world. I mean, you look at Abraham, and he has his first child, and God told him he's going to give him as many kids as it is of grains of sand on the sea. And he tells him to go kill his first child. Like, what? But he went up that mountain to go and do it. And so that's where you see faith and obedience like no other. And that's what God wants us to have. And trusting that it's going to work out in the end, whether it makes sense or not to us when he tells us, just being obedient to go and do it and trust that it will make sense when it needs to. And that's what God has really been showing me.
Obedience over sacrifice is definitely a great thing for all of us to remember. Hey, I forgot to ask you, have you listened to the Kanye album, the new Kanye West album?
Oh, man, yes, I've listened to it, brother.
What do you think?
Man, you know what? When I first heard about it, you know, everybody was talking about it. I'm like, man, Kanye up to something else. I'd already heard about him doing a church. And I was like, man, here goes Kanye with just, you know, another stunt to just being Kanye. But then I was on Twitter and I saw Shaolin talking about it, who's a Christian artist that I really respect. And he said, you know, Kanye sounds like a redeemed baby on like a baby Christian on the album. And so when he said that, I have a lot of respect for him, and it's coming from an artist.
Yeah.
So I went and listened to the album, and man, I don't know what's going on with Kanye, but somebody it sounds like somebody's discipling that dude.
Yeah.
Somebody is discipling that dude, man, because the elements of praise and authenticity that he's pouring out on those tracks. I listened to it on repeat before the last game I played. And man, I don't know, man. I think, but it's a fire album. I love the album, man. And I don't know. I haven't seen him, so I don't know what's going on with him. But definitely, there's a lot of praise going on that thing, and a lot of honesty and complete confession. And I'm praying for him that it's a full transformation happening in him. But it's definitely somebody that's around him that's sharing a lot of truth, because a lot of the stuff that he was saying, I feel like you don't even grasp until you really understand what it's like to surrender your life to Christ.
Yeah.
You know, some of the things you can know about Jesus and know about God, but you know, because the gospel is a mystery. The gospel is a mystery. And so you don't understand the gospel until you've been transformed by it. And so the fact that he was able to say some of that stuff, the way that he was saying, it sounded like a person that was truly being transformed or had been transformed. So I'm definitely excited to see what's next from him. only time will tell.
Yeah, it's the inside joke here, and nobody outside of our little sphere will understand this. But can you imagine him coming to a PAO conference someday?
Yo,
I'm just putting that out there. Someday, you never know what God will do, right? That's funny.
You never know what God will do. But see, the word does say, man, you'll know them by their fruit. So I think we all can just stand back and watch the fruit that comes from his life, and we'll be able to know.
That's it. Demario Davis, New Orleans Saints linebacker. Thanks for your time, brother. Really appreciate you. And hopefully I'll see you soon. Thanks again.
All right, take care. Be blessed.
That's Demario Davis, New Orleans Saints linebacker. We love having Demario on the show. He's been on multiple times in the past, and I'm sure he'll be on again. And he's just an awesome dude and a great man of God. And he mentioned the headband man of God. You can go to his Instagram page. I almost said his Twitter page, but go to his Instagram page. That's the best place to go. Literally the letters D, then the number 56, and then Davis. D56 Davis is his Instagram page, and you'll see the link in there to take you to the website to purchase a Man of God headband. They're $25, and all proceeds will be donated to St. Dominic's Emergency Department at the hospital. And you get a free Man of God wristband with that order as well. And they also have, again, woman of God, I should say, man of God, and child of God. So really cool things that he's doing with raising funds. And he said $250,000 have been raised for the hospital because of these headbands by Sleefs. It's Sleefs, Sleefs.com. Good stuff there from Demario Davis. His new book, that's one you want to pick up. Go to Amazon and check that one out. It's called The Unsuccessful Champion, Finding True Victory in the Midst of Adversity. It released in early October. The foreword is written by Benjamin Watson. And I'm telling you, there's some stories in that book that will blow you away. Demario Davis, new book, The Unsuccessful Champion. Check it out on Amazon.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Again, we want to mention our website, sportspectrum.com. Get our magazine. That's only $18 for an entire year. Great way to support the ministry. Sports Spectrum's magazine. You can order it right at sportspectrum.com. And subscribe to this podcast, man. Don't miss an episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast. We've had so many episodes, and we got some great things coming in the future down the pike, including a new podcast that we'll tell you more about in a little while. But it's a great new podcast, football related, and it's going to be running 12 episodes of this new podcast coming your way from the directors and the producers of Sports Spectrum in mid to late December is when that podcast will be released, and more information about that will be coming your way very soon. And we also have some potential big news happening in 2020 with Sports Spectrum, and we'll tell you about that as well very soon. So you want to stay tuned and make sure you're locked in by subscribing to the podcast and checking out our website, sportspectrum.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time with a new episode on Sports Spectrum's podcast. I hope you have a great rest of your day. This is Sports Spectrum.